Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Jaclyn Roessel with me with Grownup Navajo. So before we get started, if you could just introduce yourself, Jaclyn, and then we'll get into the conversation from there.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to be here yet. Dul si duine Jaclyn Roessel an siad tá tíní na sle cí ané be sin tu a cóide I de se ché dó be ganné de chanile, le go tu gaid dó sanna Canada na se. I am Jaclyn. My pronouns are she, they, and asa. I am a mama, a partner. I'm traditionally accepted into the Pueblo of the Maya and make my home in the Pueblo of Santa Ana alongside my husband and partner and my two babies. And I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here with us and for coming on to share your story. So Grown Up Navajo is a digital media company to uplift and support Indigenous communities, correct? That's what you told
Yeah.
met a few days or a couple weeks ago. Can you share a little bit about Grown Up Navajo? What's your business? Like what's the model, the structure, all of that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I'll kind of build upon what I shared. We have been in existence since 2017. That's when Grown Up Navajo, the company, was founded. And we are a digital media education company really dedicated to weaving together Diné ways of knowing and community building strategies to really reimagine a world where Indigenous sovereignty and culture can really thrive. And we do that through a couple of different ways. I am a facilitator and a consultant. So I like to hold space with organizations, with people who are really envisioning how their work can impact more community members. I work with both Indigenous and non-Indigenous and BIPOC-led organizations. I'm also a liberatory kinship coach. I'm certified in a couple of different coaching schools and really work from a anti-racist and liberatory like framework for that and do both one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And I'm also um, spending time in really like supporting individual like leaders, sometimes artists, sometimes different organizing members in our community, thinking about the ways in which they are wanting to maybe launch a project or like take time for themselves or build relationship in and with new partners. And so that really is like the strategic thought partnership branch of our work and the place where we house like our consulting. So as a digital media education company, we really are kind of pivoting into this from having a core of our work really having developed in consulting. We are a S corp and working really based. Our HQ is in Pueblo Lands. I work out of our family home and travel and work both digitally and in person with organizations across the country. And that's really the way that our work exists now.
That's awesome. So you're kind of like online mobile type of business, which is that what allows you to work off of the Pueblo land, the Tamaya Pueblo land?
Yeah, so much of what I think a core of the ways in which we built and had a lot of growth in our company was really from the point of the pandemic when we had to be home, we had to be virtual. There wasn't an option of being in person. So a lot of what I was doing in space where I would like facilitate meetings or support people in their visioning sessions, I was just at the time of the pandemic getting into my first coaching program, my first coach training school. And so that was kind of a new skill I was building at that point. And so since then, over time, like a lot of the offerings that we've done, like as a company, have been virtual, and it's been really um, a huge blessing to be able to be in the place where like now we've really fully shifted into working in person. So I do support organizations who are holding retreats and planning sessions in different places outside of New Mexico. And I think I'm really excited about that, but also balance that with the fact that like a core part of like me being a mom is like wanting to do drop off and pick up and wanting to be in my kids' lives. And so I think being able to build the company around like my two kids. When my oldest was younger, I would say that he was like the VP of my company. And I think that's still true. I think that there's a lot of ways that him and his sister are kind of the people who are really negotiating with me, like where and how I spend my time and the way I kind of talk to them about the work I do and why it's important, especially because it is from a social justice lens, is how I kind of create the company that we have.
That's awesome. I love that you've incorporated your kids like into your business. I'm sure they're learning so many valuable skills and like life lessons through just kind of engaging with you in that way. So you've talked about the what, like what is your business? And you shared a little bit about this already, but can you talk to us and share more of the how? Like how did your business come to be? Did you always plan on being a business owner? Like what was that journey that led you to starting Grown Up Navajo?
Yeah, so the name from Grownup Navajo actually, I love telling this story because it um just always leaves me with a really grounded and like warm feeling like in my heart and my belly. It began like actually as a blog. Like my first passion like in life is being a writer. I have journaled like all my life. I have always loved writing and have several, published like articles in different outlets. And I in 20 what is it? 2012, I was playing like everyone at that point like had a blog and I was really thinking about like, oh, like what would my blog be? Because I was following a lot of like lifestyle blogs, a lot of people that were making like really cool things, but I wasn't seeing anything that really that I was like resonating with. That was something that was like very culturally specific. Things were about like how do you create the home you want, like how do and it was not necessarily like the focus I was like looking at, so I wasn't seeing myself in a lot of the blogs. And I was kind of toying with this idea when in April of that year, like my grandmother, my dad's mom, my Nelly lady, passed away very suddenly. She had gotten sick. We thought she was getting better, and then it was just like, and she was gone. And I remember just being so grief stricken and really just like grasping for like what next. She was the person who I first learned of like my Navajo womanhood through. I was always calling her for just support. I was working in Phoenix at the time at a museum. And so just was like really struggling always with like homesickness. I grew up on the res and just I've never liked being in a city. Like it was always just really hard space for me to exist in and find a place where I thrived, and yet I was doing work that felt really meaningful. So she was like this compass, and then losing her I was like at a loss. And then it began to become clear to me in that process of grieving that I really wanted to make something that would kind of honor what I kept coming back to, like as an orientation in that moment of time. And that was like my Diné womanhood, like being a Masa and where that came from. And so much of that was connected to having my Navajo puberty ceremony. And so Grown Up Navajo initially is like the blog name that I gave like my my creation really, and just really started working from this place of like it being a tribute to what she instilled in me and what I knew would always create a direction and a process for me to come back to, which I think is fitting, especially like we're talking today now, like in this moment, like after like the general election, right? And it feels very disorienting to be in this place where you are, I feel, I should say, like very challenged by the amount of racism, misogyny that we're up against, and the ways in which, like, I feel this visceral hurt, like, of just my culture and like what's made me be me continue to be under attack. And that I think in that moment of time, like Grown Up Navajo was a way for me to express my grief, but also to begin to like really articulate that like our Indigenous culture is a human right. Like our understanding, like it wasn't so much just that like culture matters. And this is all just at the cusp of like representation matters and like all of these narratives that we like we're steeped in now, like in our Indigenous, our greater Indigenous community. And I think that it really allowed me to focus like my attention. And so I was doing a lot of creative work. I was writing blogs and I started doing poetry. And as Instagram like was created and made, I started sharing a lot of it began to attach me, Jaclyn, like to this identity of grown up Navajo. And so my process of starting the company was like kind of a little bit backwards than some. Like I created this like social media persona. And at the same time, my museum career was like becoming much more challenged because it was really it's like all the things you hear about museums being hard spaces or just like really institutional places being very challenging and hard on the spirit. And I just was like at this loss of like, how am I going to keep moving this ball forward? And I came to this place where I realized that it was either like choose myself and what was going to like what was important to me or sacrifice myself again. And I would not be the better for it. Like I would kill a little bit of more of my spirit. And I decided to choose myself. Like put in my 2 weeks notice from the museum and and began to shift into something new. I landed as a result of being in a long distance relationship with my then boyfriend, now husband. Um, Landed in New Mexico and was like, okay, now what do I do? Like, this is not the way most people, maybe some people start their business, but it's not like the most calming way to start a business because it was very much like felt like out of survival and probably a lot of scarcity too. And I landed here, applied to New Mexico Communities, Capitals, Native Entrepreneurs and Residents program, which really, oh, that is the program that like Growing Up Navajo owes so much to because it allowed me to really explore what this was going to be and how I began to articulate, okay, I want to do consulting. And in the beginning, we really focused on, I was going to do really like essentially social justice, equity, kind of what's now known as like DEI work, but really like focusing on arts and culture, museum institutions, because that's where my career was. I worked in that field for over 11 years. And so I was able to kind of build like clients and like working in these kind of one-off like ways of like, okay, like I'm going to do a training here, I'm going to do keynotes here. And over time, like that base of people I began to work with weren't just museum folks anymore. I began, working with the state of New Mexico. And so really like that was just through relationships. And some of those relationships were actually founded in the NMCC's NEAR program. And that was such a gift to be in that program in that moment of time, to have like that infusion of grant money to be able to start like my business and like pay myself to like be able to like have good food while I was like having mentorship and able to really like workshop. My mentor Wendy Ederer was amazing and really was able to help me kind of fine tune my consulting services at that time and think about the ways in which like I really began to leverage like the career I had, and that really got us off the ground. And from that, through kind of word of mouth and just like networking, I began to make relationships and connections to new people, and slowly then began to work with non-arts and culture organizations. So that has now become like a really small sliver like of my work now, and I'm doing a lot more community-based, social justice focused clients that I now get to work with, that I'm so excited to be in company with.
That's such a beautiful story. I love that your grandma was kind of the driver of this new creation, like it's a way to honor her and to honor where you come from and just like carry on that legacy of like growing up Navajo and what that means. So thank you for sharing all of that
Yeah,
with us.
absolutely.
Um, so now you're established. Is it like just you as the main consultant? Do you contract with other people? Kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have two employees, myself and our creative strategist, who's also my partner in creativity and co-parenting and all of the things. And so it's technically the two of us as staff at Grownup Navajo, and then we consult. So I mean, then we contract. So we have people that we work with on small projects, who come in and support. And I think we're at this moment of really thinking through, well, like what do we need? Like what are the pieces that we want to hold as we build out this organization? Like who are going to be the core staff of it? And like what is this fuller vision of like who do we need to look for? And so that I feel like we're at this exciting kind of like precipice of like really begin to like look forward into um what comes next.
What does that kind of look like? Like what are your goals for Grown Up Navajo? What are the next steps that you guys have been thinking about?
Yeah, I love that question. So one of the biggest things, and I think when we first met, I was telling you, I was like, I don't really remember our new mission. Like I've been trying like to commit it to memory. We've been in this like visioning and strategic planning and just kind of like crystallizing that like in my mind. So really, what does it mean to be a digital media and education company? Really, the digital media part is so much of like what we've been thinking about with regard to like our start. It's really been the storytelling, the digital storytelling pieces that we've built. So things like that exist on social media, the video vlogs that we have. One of the kind of leaps that we took with Grownup Navajo in the content part of the work. Before, people were doing a lot of like tutorials before we had reels. Um, it was like I would post like different videos of like me just like learning how to tie my CF like on my own, right? So like our traditional like Navajo hair bun, and thinking about things that would help me be a grown up. Like, what does it mean to be a grown up? This is me before I had two kids. And just like, how are the ways that I'm practicing like my culture, and really thinking and inspired by the stats that we see about Native communities? Like, we have over half of our communities who are living in urban areas away from their homelands. Well, that not only means that we're separated from our own homelands, but we're also separated from those traditional models of transference of knowledge, right? Like if you're not, like me, I'm raising intertribal kids who majority of their perspective is coming from their Pueblo community that surrounds them here. And there's so much more like on their Diné side too. And so it's like, how am I cultivating that? And so I think when I was thinking about these pieces of these like digital media assets, like I wasn't thinking at that time because I didn't have kids, I didn't have that lived experience, but I knew it was a challenge. I knew me being homesick, like in Phoenix, wasn't just something that I was experiencing like insularly, that was a shared experience. And so to me, building a digital media education company is about the different assets that we build out now that are more high tech than they were at the time when we started making them, right? Before they're again, like I go back to like when we did all of this initially, like it was before there were a lot of these social media tools that exist now. And I am thinking about building out like our podcast. Because I come from a museum background, I still hold a lot of connection to and passion for curation. So I see it in exhibits that we will curate like as part of our company. The education component is really the facets of the work that we're building out now that include e-courses, that include trainings for Indigenous people. They are the components that are really helping us to understand like the ways in which we need to really be responsible to each other. And so we'll be launching a new venture in March that it really is grounded in the philosophy of and like radical kinship of like how are we building relationship to each other and really being responsible to each other. And so um the infusion of like our Diné values and teachings are so much baked into what Grownup Navajo is, because I firmly believe that like our Indigenous culture and our specifically like the lived experience of being a Diné are ones in which like it is really important for us to kind of hold the value of these, especially these hold the value of these teachings like at heart because they don't need to be replaced. These are things that are being proven in science. These are things that people are studying and like, kind of Columbusing like in in college and in high school, like out in the world, and yet they come from our native communities. And so I really think that like where we're at, like as a company, is really thinking about these different prongs of the work that are really infusing this type of Diné perspective into a variety of different like facets like in our life, all for the betterment, the amplification of Indigenous sovereignty.
There's definitely a huge need for what you're doing, and also like preserving but also sharing those indigenous ways of knowing. So I'm not like native, I'm New Mexican, so I'm a mix of all different kinds of things. But my husband is Diné. But he was raised in Albuquerque, so he already kind of had a little bit of that separation from like his culture and some of those traditional ways and teachings, which he does have some, but I feel like at least we don't have kids yet, but we hope to someday. And I think it's super important, for us to be able to teach them, the Diné ways and that part of who they are or will be, so there's definitely a need, for people in situations like myself to, have that a place where they can access that knowledge, those stories, and then like share it with the future generations. So I'm really glad that you see that and you're kind of figuring out how do we fill that need and grow our company kind of towards, continued just education, but also I don't know, like there's a lot, it seems like different, like you said, different prongs to what you guys are doing. Um, so how has entrepreneurship and like starting your company impacted you as an individual? But also how do you see like starting your own business and entrepreneurship in general impacting your community, like where you live and work?
Yeah, I think I have such a unique placement. Um, Not that it's not a shared experience, but that so much of my work is moving like out from like this particular like headquarters, right? Like in this like for a wall, like office space. Um, because there are local organizations, but not local, like hyper local to like where I am, like say in the Pueblo that I'm working with, like in New Mexico. So I'm always, I think, from the place of like being in my community, I think there's a lot of maybe not a lot, but there are like misconceptions about, oh, like, well, she's always home, like, and it's like, oh, like there are ways in which like my work just looks different. And I think there's still a lot of like unknowns and like lack of clarity about like what being an entrepreneurship is and like is it a real like job and like are you really successful? Um, if you're always like here, I think as I've traveled more and more, I think there's probably times too when like in the community, it's like, oh, she's always traveling. And I not like here, but like in my family, in like my like networks of people. And I think those are things that um can be very gendered too, like because I am a woman, like and the perceptions of what a woman is supposed to do and how a woman is supposed to be. And I feel like I push back on those just like by my existence as being like an Indigenous entrepreneur. Um and so I think that the impact of the real exchange of like where my work lives or whether it's like altruism or just I guess what I tend to think of as like reciprocity exists in that I've built this company around like my participation like in my life and in my community. So whether that's my community here and being a good and like traditionally accepted member to my family home, like as we navigate like the care of like loved ones in our family who are dealing with like chronic illness. There are ways in which I try so much. And I feel like I am, by my own definition, successful because I'm able to still show up for my kids. I'm able to still show up for my in-laws, for my family, for my parents. And those are the things that are really important to me. And those are the ways like I give back to that kind of immediate like ring like of people. And the ways in which I really push to be like active like in our community, um our greater like indigenous community are ones that I feel like I balance with regard to everything else I'm holding.
You kind of touched on this a little bit with your last answer, but what are some challenges that you've faced as an entrepreneur and how have you overcome them or how are you like trying to overcome those challenges?
I appreciate that. um I think that like my dad did freelance work when I was younger, but I don't really have a recollection like of what that took like to support our family. Um, I knew the sacrifice because like I would visibly see like, oh, he's out on assignment and like he's not home. So like the absence like of him is what like felt um significant or something that I could see. So I think without like any other like real examples of like, well, how do you do this? Like is like the biggest challenge that I continue to face where I'm and like on top of like my own parts of like my own healing journey of just I'm a recovering perfectionist and I'm like in this place of like, oh, I have to do it right, like the first time. And that's not true. I think like a lot of my things are really like personal development pieces like of challenges because I wouldn't say that building the company has been easy by any means. I think there have been times where it's been really really like difficult. um but I think like at its core like Grown Up Navajo has really taken care of me, has really taken care of our family. And I think so much of that um, reciprocity and love and care that I've received, like from the company, is because I'm putting that back out there, right? Like it's like returning that back to like the people I'm working with, the partners that I have, like the people who I, you know, text and reach out to. And I think that those are the things that really have sustained me and allowed us to be in the place of like um being seen as like trustworthy and like able to like hold complexity in a way that I think not many people get to. Um, I think so I feel like just like the self-doubt piece, like, am I doing this right? Is something that I continuously face because I am like my most toughest like critic. And that's something I'm trying to like work on more because I am doing a lot of things and I'm doing a lot of like good things. And I consistently need to tell myself that. And um that's something that I feel like has been really significant. I think the first year was really the year that was the hardest. Like that was the year that was like, oh, like just really, really pushing through being like such wide gaps in between contracts, in between having like resources. And now I think getting to a place where I feel um able to like lean in and really plan and understand like my cash flow a lot more, so that I'm not always so on edge in making decisions or like leading the company. I think the other thing that's helped too is a couple of years ago, I think it's been 2 years now, I completed a training program for the trauma of money method. And so I'm a trauma of money method coach. Not a coach, but trained in the trauma of money method is what our certification says. And that was such an enlightening, it's psychoeducation like training program about just essentially like scarcity and the ways in which we engage with money and that we can have trauma around money. And I think understanding that about myself, like understanding that I'm in charge of a business that at its core like is supposed to make money, right? To be able to provide for my family. And still, like there are ways in which the way I grew up, the way like the means that I did or did not have, or that our family did or did not have, impact like my behaviors. And I bring those to me like in my company. And I'm trying to like continuously like understand them and like unlearn them. And that's something that I think has been um a challenge. So I think a lot of like my real hurdles have been around this like I'm a Virgo, so like I'm very analytical and like I like to like self-reflect and I look at myself and I'm like, oh, like that could have been better. But I think sometimes like you can get caught in that loop, right? Like you can get caught in like, oh, I need to do this better and this and this and this and this and this. And I don't think that that's always like really helpful. And I think I'm learning those pieces about like myself and like how do I really come to Grown Up Navajo from this place of abundance, but also just really reciprocity in the work that we're doing? Because I really do feel it's like in service of more than just my family. It's really beyond that. And that's what I try to keep in mind.
Well, you're talking to a fellow recovering perfectionist, so you're in good company here. I definitely understand and uh relate to that journey. But um as you've been building your business, and like overcoming these different challenges and growing, you already mentioned New Mexico Community Capital, but what are some other resources and organizations that have really helped you along your way that other people might want to look into if they're building and growing their own business?
Yeah, so I think that I definitely recommend like NMCC, New Mexico Community Capital, has great resources for like all levels of business, like whether you're just at the ideation phase and beyond. I also think that Native Women Lead, if you're an Indigenous woman founder or you're again in this ideation phase, like they have so many resources supporting Native women, and they're a great resource. And I think that um, from like an like maybe not necessarily like an incubation, but for a while, like I was getting some like mentorship from West, like in Albuquerque, which I don't remember what it stands for, WESS, no, ESST? Is there two T's or two S's?
It's two S's and it's women entrepreneur something. It used to be just for women, but it's women's enterprise something something. I don't know what the SST stands for, but
Yeah.
they don't only work with women now. They
Oh,
still
awesome.
focus on women, but men can use their services too.
Awesome. And they had like mentorship that I took advantage of for a while. And I think that was really helpful because it was like perspective from like outside, like my network and like circle of people. Um, I think that one of the things, like I was really fortunate to be a co-founder of like Native Women Lead and to be in the beginning of like finding a space for myself at a point in my like emergence into like entrepreneurship that I really needed just to not feel alone. So even though like I was alone in my decision making and sometimes like that was hard for me, I didn't feel alone like in this greater community. And so my hope is that, who are the people that you think about that are really um able to support you and like give you like a critical eye, a critical awareness. Like you need kind of your own like circle of like champions to be able to support like your work and to be your own, whether it's circle of champions or like personal advisory board, just the idea like people who can like provide you support that you need when you're going through like any journey, but particularly around like starting a business, it can be really, really significant and impactful to have that.
That's definitely something I've heard in a lot of the conversations that I've had is that importance of finding your people and your community as an entrepreneur because it can be very lonely. And I know that
Mhm.
is what some entrepreneurs struggle with, especially in rural and tribal communities, because they might not have that like physically close community of entrepreneurs to turn to, but luckily we do live in like a more virtual world. So if you have access to like the internet and those tools, you can also find online communities. Um, but that's definitely something that's consistently been said. When I ask that question is community is important. Um, Well, we're getting like close to the end, to wrapping up, but I do have a few more questions for you.
Mhm.
The last one that I'd like, or one of the last questions that I'd like to ask, that I ask everyone who comes on this show is if you, what are a few words of wisdom or like pieces of advice that you would give to an entrepreneur listening who maybe has just started their business or is wanting to start something but is a little hesitant, what's a piece of advice or wisdom that you would share with them?
Mm. I think I would just like keep it simple and share like do good work with your good heart. And I think that, that we I believe in you that you have like good intentions, right? And so believing in yourself that you have good intentions and leading like with that good heart. And I think when you're able to put like your brave heart forward, like it really does, it opens you up to the world. And that can feel scary, but it's also really a way to open yourself up to like more blessings or like more opportunities and more connections too.
I love that. Do good work with your good heart. That's a beautiful quote. Thank you for sharing that. And the last question that I'll ask is if people are listening and they want to connect with you further, how can they find you?
Yeah, so that's a great question, especially as I'm having difficulty like relaunching our website. Uh, but grownupnavajo.com like has a contact page. You can email me. We still have our active social media channels. But I would say I don't stay up on messages there. So I really ask that if you are trying to look for a deep connection, you can email via the contact form. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, oh my goodness, there's my dogs barking in the background. But is there any like last words or anything that you would like to share with us while we're still on here that maybe you didn't get a chance to say or share?
Mm, I don't think so. I think, I'm so motivated every day seeing just this like fluorescence like of like native entrepreneurship of people who are really reimagining like what this pathway can look like for themselves. And I think that more than ever, like working from a place of like building awareness, allows us to really create nimbleness, like in like what we're creating for our people, and those ripples can continue to be felt from beyond like where your like location is. So I think like just have so much faith in what people are creating.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your story and your words. It's really been nice listening to you, especially like sharing about your writing and how that kind of got you started. I'm a writer too, so I resonated with a lot of what you shared. And also thank you for being one of those people on that path and that journey towards kind of reimagining what entrepreneurship and business development and economic development can look like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the work that you're creating with this podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you.